Here's what I'd like to tell people about Washington D.C. It needs to be shut down, fumigated, and reopened under new management.
Good day everyone, and welcome to the Thomas More Centre channel. My name is Mark Makievsky, and today it's my great pleasure to have Alan Harrelson back to talk about the US election that's just happened over there. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Oh, Mark, it is such a pleasure to be back with you. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Yeah. I thought, first of all, we should just hear about what your expectations were regarding this election.
Well, my expectation is that Trump was going to win, even before Joe Biden was given the boot by the Democrats in Washington. I figured that Trump was going to win. And I remember that there were several people across the country who thought the same thing in July when he was almost killed. And there was no question in the minds of most people I talked to after that assassination attempt that Trump had this in the bag. But when Harris became the nominee, somewhat illegally, because she didn't receive any primary votes, I thought, well, this may create a problem because we do have a lot of people in this country on the left who will vote for her simply because she is a woman. They want to see the first woman president, regardless as to whether she's qualified or not. So there was a brief moment there where I thought, are we going to go through this all over again? Because I saw this happen in 2008. I was much younger, and I was starting graduate school that same year. But I saw the momentum that was building among people on the left who simply wanted to vote for Obama because they wanted the first black president. So thankfully, that concern began to wane after about 2 or 3 days. It was clear that she was not going to take interviews, that she didn't have what it takes to be president of the United States, that she's all talk and no action when you can get her to talk at all. And so I am elated, and the majority of the country is excited this week that she has been told to go home. She's been fired. So I'm excited, and I'm more excited than I thought I was going to be, because I think that God himself has given this country a second chance. He's given the country a second chance many times over the years. And so I hope that we don't waste it. I hope that we take advantage of this opportunity in the United States to build good businesses, to rebuild the economy, to better educate people about traditional ideas, what it means to be an American. The list goes on. But we have an opportunity. We've got to go to work. Trump's not the only person who needs to go to work. Mm-hmm. We've got to rebuild an understanding of American identity, and that's going to take time. And that's going to take a lot of work on behalf of educators, cultural influencers, a lot of different people. But I think it's happening. I think it will happen.
Looking at the electoral map in recent years, it's pretty clear that there's a battle between rural Republicans and urban Democrats. And I was wondering if you could shed some light on what it is about the different lifestyles which results in these fundamentally different worldviews.
The first U.S. census that showed that the country was primarily urban was 1890. Now, that's probably a bit earlier than what some people think it is. But you've got to remember that in 1890, the American South was still reeling from the Civil War. Most of the urban areas in the country were in areas that the war didn't touch very much. New York City, Chicago was growing largely because of the beef industry. The California coast was beginning to prosper. San Francisco. most of the large urban communities were not in the American South. But over the course of the 20th century, especially since the Second World War, the South has become increasingly known as the Sun Belt, and it's the fastest growing region in the country right now. And it's been a place for business growth. People are largely excited to move businesses to the South. Lots of reasons for that, but urban sprawl is nationwide now. Urban sprawl is nationwide. It's not simply a regional difference. The cultural differences, there is still a great chasm, so to speak, between North and South in the United States, but there's also a difference East and West. But I don't think that's the most important criteria. The most important demographic, to me, it seems, is rural versus urban. If you simply look at a county map, a county political map about which parts of the country are red based upon the 2024 election and which parts are blue, there's a stark difference between rural counties and urban counties. The urban counties are almost all Democrat. They are controlled by the left. Rural America is largely the people who put Trump in office the first time in 2016. Nobody thought it could happen. And there's strong evidence to suggest that Trump himself did not think that he was actually going to win that election. And I remember in 2016 watching when the polls started to close in the 16 election. Clinton was on the rise, and it took several hours for the rural votes to start pouring in, particularly in the western states. And then Trump gained many more electoral votes about 9 or 10 o'clock that evening. And I think those same people, plus a lot of other minority groups, I mean, large percentage of blacks and Hispanics and Asian Americans voted for Trump in this current election. But I think in 2020, many rural Americans did not show up to vote because they thought that this was in the bag, that there's no way that an incumbent president like Trump was going to lose. So I think that the same people who voted for him in 2016, they came out in droves. I mean, the voting lines, even in our very rural county here in Kentucky, the voting lines were extremely long. I mean, you had to stand in line in rural Kentucky to vote, and that doesn't happen on a normal occasion. So I think that, there is a difference. When you're raised in a rural environment, now this is my experience, and I think it's proven historically. You have a stronger degree of self-sufficiency. You want to be independent from the government. Most people who are raised in rural America are not taught that we should be taken care of by the government from the time we're born until the time we die. It's still very much Jeffersonian in rural America. By that I mean Jefferson believed in extremely limited government. He said that the best government is that which governs the least. And in urban areas, that's where you have a large degree of multiculturalism. You have so many different cultures and worldviews that are represented when so many people are trying to live together in a small space. And so there's no single unifying cultural background that serves as sort of a unifying principle in most American cities. So I'm not a believer in multiculturalism. I think this thing called a melting pot is not a good idea. I think that Richard Weaver was right. And Weaver, of course, was probably one of the most important conservative thinkers of the 20th century in the United States. He was from North Carolina. And he said, a culture can only continue to exist if it's able to successfully defend itself against cultures that are opposed to it. And so when you live in a city, it's awfully difficult to do that because there are so many opinions, so many perspectives and worldviews, and it's difficult. So there's cohesion in rural America for the most part. There's chaos within the cities. And a final quote on this topic from Jefferson again. Jefferson said that cities are to a democracy as swords are to the human body. It's very difficult to have cities and self-government at the same time.
Yeah. So the Democratic Party, as far, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has strong roots in the South. And you see the emergence of the Republicans who under Lincoln, was it? But anyway, you can clarify. So could you tell us what have been the major developments which have led to the modern day Democratic Party?
Oh, well, the Democratic Party is over 200 years old. It begins with the Democratic Republicans during Jefferson's administration. The South was overwhelmingly Democratic until the 1950s and 60s. A lot of reasons for that. It was called the Solid South. There was no strong two-party system in the American South until after World War II. I read a disappointing article on the American Thinker website this morning. Now, the American Thinker website is known to produce some good material. It's overwhelmingly conservative. I've published an article for them on the topic of rural America, as a matter of fact. And so this morning I was disappointed. I read an article that described the Democratic Party as the party which almost destroyed America in the 1860s, the party of the slave-owning South. It's not the same party. What the parties mean now is almost exactly the opposite of what it was in the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century. During the 19th century, the Democratic Party was the party of the working class. It was also the party of large landowners, the planter class in the South, and many people up north as well. It was more of a national party. The first Republican president was Abraham Lincoln. And he was the first president that was elected almost entirely by one region of the country at the expense of another region. But history changes with each passing generation. The issues that matter to people usually are not the same from one generation to the next. But it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his New Deal policies that served as the seed to transfer conservatism in America from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. And I think of people like Strom Thurmond from my native state of South Carolina. And he was a lifelong Democrat and became Republican in 1964, and he supported Barry Goldwater for president. And he did so for several reasons, but the primary reason is that he essentially believed that the Democratic Party was becoming increasingly Marxist, toying with the idea of socialism, if not outright communism. And he wasn't the only person who did that. There was a lot of people who flipped parties in the 1960s and 70s, which ultimately led to the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. And in 1984, that's the election that I heard many people earlier this week comparing the 2024 election to. It was a conservative landslide in 1984. So what the two parties stand for has changed drastically over the past even 2 or 3 generations of Americans, but it's changing again. The Democratic Party for the past 20 years has claimed that they are the party of the working class. That's not the case anymore. Donald Trump has proven that he is a populist president, and he has taken the Republican Party out of the Bush era, with Bush's concern with international wars and with largely American influence. This idea that it's our responsibility to be the police force of the world, to make the world a safe place for democracy. Trump's America First ideas is fairly revolutionary when it comes to the Republican Party. And so the Democratic Party now is in a position of utter chaos. They don't have any good leadership. There's no indication that they will have any good leadership anytime soon. And I have been hearing from particularly conservatives in the South for the past 20 years that the Democratic Party is dying a slow and miserable death. It may very well be doing that. And we have to remember that a two-party system was not something that the founding generation necessarily wanted. George Washington, most famously, was adamantly opposed to a two-party system. And we didn't have a two-party system to speak of until the election of Andrew Jackson in 1828. But anyway, we could get into a very long discussion of the historical nature of these two parties. But at the end of the day, I think that the Republican Party since Reagan has definitely been the party of American conservatism. No question about it.
Yeah, American history is quite fascinating, at least to me. But yeah, I find it somewhat ironic that the Harris campaign was gladly accepting the endorsement of the Cheneys. For
Yes,
those that
yes.
don't know, are amongst the biggest warmongers in the states. So yeah, so you mentioned previously that you thought the United States was on the brink of civil war. I was wondering, do you think that that risk has been averted with this election? And could MAGA survive a successful assassination attempt on Trump?
Nobody in this country is seriously talking about a civil war anymore. I think that has been toned down drastically. Um, and that depends on what I've got a lot of ideas about that. But if Trump did not win this election, there's no doubt in my mind that there would have been some type of move on behalf of the states to interject state authority between the people of the country and the federal government, which is not an un-American thing to do. That's actually very much in line with the Constitution. The 10th Amendment has been almost forgotten by the people who run the individual states. But as far as the MAGA movement, I hope and pray that there is no further attempt on Trump's life. But there are some strange and equally competent people who might try to do that. Who knows? But it would be a mistake. It would be a serious mistake. That person would not live to see another day if they successfully assassinated the president. But I don't think that's going to happen. Can the movement survive without Donald Trump? I think it can. But at the same time, I have to realize that this whole movement back to conservatism throughout the country is largely because of his personality, his energy, and his accomplishments. When people who I know think about Donald Trump, they do not think about a New York real estate business guru. New York is not in the equation at all. They think about a man who genuinely loves the country, who's just as approachable in a McDonald's restaurant as he is in, the ivory towers of New York City. So I really think that the movement is much, much bigger than Donald Trump, because most people who vote for him, they realize that this is a representative. The president that we have now elected is a representative of a much larger understanding of American history and American identity that will outlive him. Now, I don't know how that would happen, exactly how long that would occur, but there are essentially two different Americas that we're still dealing with. We're not dealing with a single unified country. We are dealing with a massive amount of division. Trump did get the popular vote, but there were still millions upon millions of people who voted for Harris. And those people are up in arms right now trying to figure out what to do. And the freaks in Hollywood are threatening to leave the country. Well, perhaps that's the best thing for you to do. Put Delta's ready when you are. If you want to leave, then go. But I heard an interesting piece of analysis on Fox News the other day. A gentleman was explaining that the problem has fixed itself, that the American system is capable of fixing itself if you allow the system to work. And that's what's happened. The people of the country have said no to multiculturalism. They have said no to the woke agenda. They have said no to increased government intervention in the economy. And it's a wonderful and exciting time to watch American politics. And I think we need to continue talking about all of this because the country is still very much divided. And I don't believe in this notion of national unity. I think that's a false premise. That's the wrong approach to this. There are people in this country on the left who want the country to fail. They actually, by design, want the country to fail. They don't think that there's anything special about America, that there's nothing redeemable about America. They want it to die. And all you have to do is listen to some of these history professors and political science professors and these philosophers in the state-funded schools throughout the United States, these colleges and universities. That's where the current liberal faction was built. Since the 1960s and 70s, what is now the American left was created by the American higher education system. And so it's very difficult, particularly for a Christian, to seek unity and solidarity with millions of people who have no moral basis for any decision that they make, who do not believe that Jesus Christ is who he said he is. And they do not want you to believe in Jesus Christ either. They want anything that's left of Christianity and traditional Christian thought to be destroyed in America. But most of the people in the country, thankfully, are no longer buying the progressive platform. There is a huge surge back to traditional ways of thinking in the United States, and I am so glad to see it. I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, it strikes me that you have people calling for peace when just all of a week ago, Trump was a fascist who was going to take over the country and deserved imprisonment. And there are political prisoners and all these kind of things. And how all of a sudden can you go to being friends again? It doesn't quite seem to work like that.
Well, I was watching. Actually, this was from an Australian news network. They created a compilation of TikTok videos and that sort of thing from people on the left who were distraught about Trump winning this election, and they made their opinions known on video. And there was this one black woman who said, "I'm afraid to go to sleep tonight because I may wake up a slave in the morning." These people genuinely believe that American conservatives and people who voted for Donald Trump want to return to the 1850s. That is exactly not the case. American conservatism is on the rise because progressive thought, progressive policies have been proven to fail at least for the past 20 or 25 years. They have been proven to fail.
Yeah. You mentioned that there were people who are actively seeking to destroy the United States, and it brings to mind the open southern border, where essentially you flood the nation with migrants and you dissolve all cultural identity, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, that's always struck me as an act of treason. And it got me thinking, why do we in the West, so the States and other Western countries, do we seem to go soft on people who want to burn flags, tear down our institutions? Why do we tolerate the enemies within?
Well, we do have freedom of speech in this country. We have to be very careful about what we say regarding that. People are free to say whatever they want to. They are not free to tell people who disagree with them that we have to tolerate evil, that we have to tolerate ways of life and accept these things as equally valuable as the laws of God. You know. The best response to an enemy within is to simply ignore it. Just simply ignore it. I've tried to engage with people who are constantly pushing me for being too conservative, for being too religious, and for being rather vocal in my opinions about these things. I do not hide my opinions on the Pipe Cottage YouTube channel or anything to do with my brand. And I am very much interested because I'm a history PhD. I have thoughts and opinions about some very serious issues. And if all I wanted to do was talk about pipes and tobacco in various hobbies, then I'm wasting my time. There's far more that a man should be doing than simply uh, cheering for a sports team and pursuing various hobbies. And there is an enemy within. The best thing to do is ignore it. What I don't know what else can be done. Whether we want to call it treasonous or not, there are successful people who will continue to build things and to be successful in whatever they do, and then you've got people who are going to tear material down. It's been that way throughout the ages. And people who are mediocre want you to be mediocre as well. They do not like seeing people succeed in life. And G.K. Chesterton made an excellent point about this. He said most people who don't read history, who don't think about the past, that's the case simply because they don't want to be faced with the accomplishments of previous generations. It makes them feel like they have to live up to something that's greater than themselves, and they don't have the courage to do so. They would rather be ignorant. They would rather think that being mediocre is okay when it's not. All of these people who may be enemies within, they're mediocre. They're not building anything important. But there are far more people in the United States who have talent and ability, particularly younger men and women, and they're going to build a brighter future for the country. And I think that's just being played out in this election. I think this is a springboard. It's not the end game. Electing Donald Trump is not the end game. It's a springboard, an opportunity for the country to build a better future. And Obama ran on a message of change and hope. No, it was actually a destructive presidency. Obama did more to foment racism in the United States than any president that I can think of in American history. But no, this is a new day. This will be remembered as the era of Trump when historians 100 years now are writing about this period of our country's past.
Yeah. Speaking of American exceptionalism, you have Elon Musk. I don't know what your opinions are on space travel to Mars. It would be interesting to hear what your thoughts are. But obviously, he landed the booster rocket within those little chopsticks or whatever they call it. It's quite amazing technology that he's developed. But of course, when he took over Twitter, it's reported that he sacked about 80% of the workers there. And X, as it's become, is still functioning as it used to, suggesting that those 80% weren't actually contributing anything. What would you think about him running what they call this new Government Efficiency Commission and getting stuck into the bureaucracy?
I don't know a whole lot about Elon Musk. I know that he's an accomplished individual in the tech world, but I live on a farm in Kentucky, so I don't, other than the computer that I'm using to talk to you right now, I have very little interest in technology. I have no interest in going to Mars, and frankly, I don't know why anybody would. But, everybody's got their own interests and their own talents that they capitalize on. I see Musk as a similar personality to Donald Trump. He's not a career politician. He's a businessman who has made a lot of money because he's talented. He knows how to get stuff done. Same thing with Trump. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what Musk is going to do. If he's going to help Trump reduce the power of the government, in whatever realm, whatever official sphere Musk is going to be involved with, if they can reduce the bureaucrats, if they can Washington is way, way, way too big. I was just in D.C. Probably a couple of months ago. I gave a talk there, and I couldn't stand it. I could not tolerate that place. It's too big. It's a fairly nasty place to try and live. It's overwhelmingly liberal, overwhelmingly globalist and cosmopolitan. Here's what I like to tell people about Washington D.C. It needs to be shut down, fumigated, and reopened under new management. And that's what's about to happen. At least is going to be under new management for the next 4 years. And so hopefully Musk and other people who can help him. Actually, I'm more excited about RFK Jr.'s role in the administration. I'm far more excited about RFK Jr. because I think he's bringing a lot of important opinions and experiences to the table, particularly with his understanding of American food problems and American disease. Anybody with a brain, particularly anybody who lives on the land and who homesteads or farms for a living, has known for many, many years that our food is killing us. And I was so happy to see somebody come forward during this election cycle talking about this. The USDA and the Department of Agriculture, all of these, they need to be fundamentally reduced and reorganized if they're going to continue to exist at all. And ironically, it was Abraham Lincoln who created the Department of Agriculture during the Civil War. But at that time, the Department of Agriculture had a completely different role. They were trying to expand the country westward, and completely different historical dynamic. Now we've got the federal government in hot with big pharma, with big ag, and I'm a Wendell Berry fanatic. I really enjoy the writings of Wendell Berry, who is perhaps the most popular voice of rural America that's been writing literature for the past 50, 60 years. He is now. I don't agree with Barry's politics because he was an Obama nut. He's far more liberal than I could ever imagine being. But I think he's right about the problems with our food, with our culture. When you have a country where less than 1% of the population is involved with an agricultural lifestyle that makes a living from the land, then it's disastrous. Because particularly when you think about the fact that this country was primarily rural and agricultural until fairly recently. It wasn't until the 1950s and 60s that most people in the South decided to do something else for a living. So I'm seeing my understanding of American history, my passion for rural America, and my passion for people being more responsible for their food supply. I see all of that represented in RFK Jr. And I think that his attack on big pharma and big ag is speaking to many intelligent and accomplished people across the country. But anyway, I've already forgotten your original question. I'm just rambling.
We were just talking about cutting bureaucracy, but that's fine because I had a question about RFK, and it was quite remarkable that Trump built this coalition of RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, and they call it the dream team, right? Of the people he's brought around him, which gives a great sense that something big might happen this term, whereas in his last term he didn't know how to govern, and he had a whole bunch of neocons and whatnot surround him and control him a bit.
Well, it may have been the historian Victor Davis Hanson who said this a couple of days ago. I think it was. He made the astute point that Trump's had 4 years to think about what he did right and what he could have done better in the first term. And there's a lot more experience under his belt now. And so that's a major reason why, for me personally, it's going to be not only interesting but entertaining to watch how he's going to deal with Washington and the federal bureaucracy during the first 100 days. Because he himself has admitted that he would have done some things differently during that first term. He would have probably had better people surrounding him. So one of the best things that he's done since election night was to immediately start building the administration. I mean, there's already several thousand people moving to Washington, D.C. this week to prepare for the transfer of power. And that's the way it works in the country. That's one of the benefits of having a republic. If things don't go right, the people have the authority and the obligation to make sure that the country heads in a different direction. And so, for the first time in 4 years, I'm proud to be an American this week. I've not necessarily been proud to be an American over the past 4 years. I thought that the country was probably headed in an irreversible direction based upon progressivism and the woke agenda, because that's all we've heard since 2015 when Donald Trump came down and at Trump Tower and announced that he was running for president. This woke agenda has almost engulfed the mainstream media. But interestingly enough, things like what you are doing and what other online personalities are doing is actually destroying the influence of the mainstream media in the United States. This was the podcast election. I am still just trying to wrap my mind around the influence of podcasts and YouTube videos and social media. Social media is what won this election for Donald Trump. And I firmly believe that. I think his interview with Rogan got, I don't know, last time I checked, it was like 50 million views, something like that. That's a massive amount of attention. But I think that's a good thing. It's sort of the breaking down of it's how do I put this? It's making the media more local and more meaningful. That's what's happening. It's becoming more local and more meaningful because you can reach people with your opinions and your perspective that other people can't. I can reach people with my message that perhaps somebody else can't do. And then you've got just a massive amount of content creators who are speaking the language of a lot of different people. And people want someone to articulate what they believe. Not everybody wants to be a public speaker. Not everybody wants to be a politician. Not everybody wants to be heard from at all. I mean, I think it was Richard Nixon who coined the term the silent majority. There are many hardworking family people in the United States who don't want to have an online personality. They just want to live a quiet and unobserved life. But they do enjoy and support those who articulate what they believe. And so there will be a media one way or the other. And I think it is a good thing that social media is replacing the influence of the national news media on a significant scale.
Yeah. I think a lot of us around the world are breathing a massive sigh of relief because there was a sense that the walls were closing in, that X was going to be shut down, that the Democrats would solidify their power. And all of a sudden, X stays alive. Trump gets to restore order to the world, we would hope, and there's certainly early indications of that. So it's a joyful moment for the world, I think, to have dodged a bullet of their own. So you mentioned in a video that you posted on your own channel that you would be hopeful that Donald Trump would abolish income tax. I was hoping to get some more of your thoughts on that, and in particular, how the United States government would transition from its reliance on income tax to another source of income.
Well, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution states that the Congress shall have power to levy income taxes. It doesn't say that Congress has to do that. But I think that the best way to completely destroy the income tax is to repeal that amendment, which would require a constitutional amendment to repeal it. Because if you don't set it in stone, then you've got new administrations that will come in to power in the future who will have the authority to raise taxes, etc. The country, when it was first founded, relied the federal government relied upon tariffs, taxes on imported goods for the massive bulk of its income. The federal government is way, way too big. It should not need the amount of money that it's stealing from the American population. If you destroy the IRS, and Congress absolutely makes it impossible for families, hardworking families, to be taxed by the federal government, then you are releasing an extraordinary amount of capital. Now, what kind of example can I use? Well, let's even just talk about my own wife. She, when we got married, she started a marketing agency, and she's very good at marketing. And she designs websites for people, manages social media accounts, and all that stuff that marketing people do. But when we got married, that business did not exist, and that was 8 years ago now. Now it's at the point where it is a 7-figure business. And the amount of money that we have to pay to Washington, D.C. is astronomical. It's the biggest headaches that we have has to deal with the IRS. And it's small businesses are being ruined because of the Internal Revenue Service. If we could and we're talking about 25 to 35% of a person's income being taken by the government. And what's the government doing with this money? The government is so much in debt now. And what are they doing with the money? The income tax doesn't have to exist. There are states within the country that don't have state income tax. Tennessee, I may be wrong about that. I know Tennessee doesn't have property tax, but there are states within the country that do not have state income tax. And I understand I've been criticized several times by people who watch my channel that are concerned with, well, we got to have a way to build roads. We got to have a way to have public services, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's fine, but you do not need a federal income tax to do it. And so I don't know of a single person that's a small business owner, that's a farmer, that's working a job, a 9 to 5. I don't know one person who would be disappointed if the IRS simply no longer existed. So why is it there? Why can't we put it up to a vote? Why can't we have a convention of states that allows the people of the individual states to decide whether a constitutional amendment needs to be instituted to repeal the 16th Amendment? It's an interesting discussion. There are ways for the federal government to get the money that it needs, and I think that has to happen through tariffs, a modest tariff on imported goods. One of the reasons Trump is wanting to place higher tariffs, of course, on imported goods is to bring business back to the country with his America First agenda. That doesn't have to be the case forever. Bring people back, and then you can levy a modest tariff on imported goods that will. When Trump was president, this country earned multiple millions, perhaps billions of dollars based upon the tariff program that Trump instituted during his first administration. In short, the country existed without the 16th Amendment for well over 100 years. It can exist without it again. But there are other things that really need to take priority. We need to tone down the temperature in the Middle East to the best we can. To get these wars. If Trump, and I think it's going to happen, I think Trump within the first 100 days is going to solve a lot of problems internationally. But I'm thankful that these international issues are not his top priority for the long run. His priority is, in fact, the United States. And I think that we would do well to return to somewhat of an isolationist perspective. The founding generation did not think that we needed to engage with foreign conflicts. Now, I understand that there was a serious obligation during the First World War and the Second World War for the United States to engage those particular conflicts. But I don't think that it was necessary for us to be in Korea or Vietnam. And that's a hotly debated topic. It wasn't necessary for us to be in Iraq for many, many years. Um, Jefferson and Washington were both of the opinion that we have two large oceans that separate us from the majority of international conflicts, but the world is much smaller now because of technology and communications and transportation revolutions. And so it's a difficult subject, but I think there is still a way for us to fix the problems at home without trying to fix the problems of everybody else around the world.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. And in terms of saving the budget, you would be saving trillions of dollars, I imagine, in very short order to adopt a more isolationist approach. But then the question is, what happens to the rest of the world who are so used to the United States kind of managing affairs?
Well,
So
see, this is you can't making the world safe for democracy, a term coined by Woodrow Wilson, if I'm not mistaken. That's almost impossible. Uh, you cannot have a democracy in a population where the people have no experience governing themselves. The the United States was created in the 1770s after 150 years of self government within the context of the British Empire. One of the reasons that an American Revolution existed in the first place is because the British Crown under King George III thought that the colonies needed to help pay some of the cost of the French and Indian War, and so they increased taxes. Of course, that's an entirely different topic in and of itself, but there has to be you have to want freedom, and you have to realize that there comes an immense responsibility with freedom. Freedom means that you don't simply sit on your butt and do nothing. You have to go to work to build a country. You have to build and defend a country that you want to have, and that's suitable for the development of a civilized society. Um, you can't teach people how to govern themselves. They have to experience it. And some people around the world, I don't know that everybody wants to be a democracy. I mean, I can't imagine. I can't imagine the people of England wanting to become a miniature version of the United States. I mean, they have a monarchy that's been in place for several centuries, and it's a system that they have admired and that has worked for them for a very long period of time. Um, so I think we need to fix our country first. And Donald Trump can't do that by himself. It can be done by on the local level by ignoring the shouting heads who think that we need to accept any and all versions of truth, any and all lifestyles. No, we don't. There is a right and a wrong way to live one's life. You either live according to the rules of God and the laws of God, or you follow your own path. God has given us free will in that regard. And I'm thankful that the United States, at least right now, is in a position where it can heal some old wounds. There is a healing process that can happen now. And I pray that we have the courage to fulfill that process.
speaking of God, I noticed that God was mentioned much more frequently this time round, it seems. Tucker Carlson, in particular, seems to be much more upfront about his faith. Even Trump acknowledging God's work in the failed assassination attempt. Um, and I haven't seen this kind of probably genuine acknowledgement of God in American politics for some time. I was wondering what you made of this development.
I think that the country is not primarily Christian now. Let me say that first and foremost. I've had several people this week ask me, do you think that the United States is still a Christian nation? I don't think it is. I think the American South is the anchor, however. The South has been for generations and remains the most religious region in America. Flannery O'Connor once put it best. She said, the South is not Christ centered, but it is Christ haunted. There is this immense understanding of Christian morality, even among people in the South who do not attend church, do not necessarily profess Christianity. They still have a level of understanding about Christian morality that other people around the country simply don't have anymore. I sometimes wonder whether the mention of God is used for political purposes to gain the vote of the evangelical community. I don't think Donald Trump is necessarily an extremely religious man. I don't think that many people around him are necessarily religious, other than I think Vance is probably a devout Catholic. I think that RFK Jr. is definitely a devout Catholic. And these are good developments. They're good developments, but unfortunately, I don't think what God wants is the top priority for the Trump administration, or quite frankly, many people who voted for him. Because we are extremely selfish by nature. And unless we are willing to go to war with that selfishness every day, to die to ourselves on a daily basis, to sacrifice things that we want so that we can better fulfill the plan of God in our own individual lives, then, we're fooling ourselves and thinking that the United States is motivated by Christianity. It is not. I think Pope John Paul II said that there is no longer Christendom. There is no longer a Christian civilization in the West. What we have are pockets of local Christian communities, and that's where we need to focus our efforts. And I think that JP2 was exactly right about that. The best we can do is develop strong Christian communities on the local level, in our homes, with our neighbors, with our local parishes. There's only so much that we need to worry about, or that we can do to influence policies on the national level, or even policies at the state level. But we have the power to vote. But other than that, we can't control much that happens. But we can control our homes and our own souls, and we can pursue personal holiness. And I don't think most Americans do that. I think most Americans now are, because I don't think the United States was ever any different from any other country in this regard. I think it's wrong. I mean, there are historians now. I taught at Liberty University for 7 years, and I knew historians there who wanted to teach American history in a way that made it seem like the country has always been primarily Christian, that it was founded for Christian reasons, Christian principles, for religious freedom. I think the economic concerns of individuals and families has always been more important than religion in motivating the history of the United States. And I think that's still the way now. People voted. The number one thing that people were concerned about during this election cycle was the economy. They were not concerned with a culture war. They were concerned with economic problems. And so that's my long-winded answer to that question. There's mention of God. Yeah, people can mention God all they want to, but until there's some type of lifestyle to back it up, I really don't pay much attention to it.
Yeah. I had a conversation today with someone who was familiar with Cardinal Pell, who was Australia's only cardinal. And he said while he was alive that Trump was a barbarian, but he's our barbarian. People will take different views on how uncouth he is, but J.D. Vance is somewhat more of a refined character, let's say, very articulate. So wondering, had you read Hillbilly Elegy? What are your thoughts on him? And do you see him as Trump's inevitable successor?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about his career. I remember when the film Hillbilly Elegy came out years ago, and I did not watch it. I watched a couple of trailers, and I thought this is just horrible. This is portraying Appalachian families in a very negative light. And so I never watched it. I've never read the book. I can understand where he's coming from. He did come from a background that unfortunately many people throughout the country deal with, not simply in Appalachia. You have parents that are not necessarily doing the best that they can for the family. You've got drug addicts. Uh, as far as him personally, he's from, I think, Breathitt County, Kentucky, which is not far from where we live. And of course, he's got Ohio lineage as well, but I think that his roots are very much Kentuckian. And I don't know enough about his role in the Catholic Church or his journey to Catholicism, but it seems to me that his faith is going to be somewhat, I don't know. I hate to say that it's going to be secondary, but I don't think that that's what's necessarily motivating his interest in Trump ideology and in Trump policies. He's going to be Trump's second eyes. He's going to do what Trump wants him to do. But I don't think he's going to be the person to necessarily carry on Trump's policies if he runs for president. It's very rare in American history that a vice president actually becomes president. I think it only happened twice. And most recently, that was with George Bush in 1988. It's awfully difficult, but I think he's a talented man. I think he's well-spoken. He's obviously a good writer. He's got experience in the military. He's got a wonderful wife. I guess I don't know anything about her either, but it doesn't matter as long as he can do the job. I think that's the most important thing. And that's what I tell people about Trump. He's not in a position to be pastor. He's not a qualified person to be a ministry leader, but he is abundantly qualified to be president because he's been president before. And it's going to be interesting to see how Vance performs. He's been a senator, but it'll be very interesting to see how he's going to perform as a part of Trump's administration. I don't know, and nobody does. We will not know that until they hit the ground running in January.
Yeah. Just in closing, I was hoping you could give yourself a plug. So for those who haven't encountered you before on our channel, how can they find more out about you? Yeah, go for it.
Well, online, my brand is the Pipe Cottage, which is dedicated to the pipe smoking hobby and all the good things that come with the pipe and premium pipe tobacco. But I started that brand 3 years ago, but it has evolved into something far, far different. Since our conversion to Catholicism last year, it has evolved into a larger discussion of politics and religion and cultural issues, particularly in the United States. And so the Pipe Cottage YouTube channel is where most people can find me. We also are on Instagram. We have a website, pipecottage.com. And so that's what we're doing right now. Other than that, I live on my farm here in Kentucky, and life is good. It's good to be an American this week, at least. And we will see what the Lord brings us over the next 4 years.
And for the pipe smokers out there, I guess they might be curious about which blend you used to celebrate the election win.
Well, I was using a McClellan blend. It's a company that's no longer in business. They were from Kansas City, Missouri, and the blend was entitled Christmas Cheer. It was a straight Virginia pipe tobacco that they used to release every year about this time as we approach the Christmas season. So that's the blend that I use, the celebratory blend, because it's awfully difficult to find anymore.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Alan Harrelson joining us from Kentucky. Thanks so much for joining us. I must say I've enjoyed this far more than the punditry being offered by CNN and whatnot. And I'm sure those watching will have enjoyed it much more as well. Thanks so much for joining us. For those who are watching, if you like this interview and our other content, please subscribe so to help our channel grow and we can get more people like Alan on. Alan, thanks so much for joining us. God bless.
Thank you, sir.